that. Yeah. Any other question?
Okay, wonderful.
Oh yeah, this is actually this is my friend. She's based in Hawaii. Judith, I commissioned her to do it. Her name is Anakshi. Yeah, she's
Wonderful. I would like to ask something related to that. I mean, the aesthetics and the sensorium related to practices, Yoga practices, something more on that. Because they are not prioritizing only the visual, they are also chanting and listening to music and dancing. So
Yes. So at the moment, as I mentioned, Ayesha Irani and myself are doing a project on this Vaishnava sensorium, and there's a lot of interesting work being done by different scholars in this in music, and Karala, she's doing the Mahotshav, and this among the Montawas, all the bodily touch, etc., etc. I have not studied these very critically, these other senses. What I have looked at is I'm looking at that in that context at the poetry of Narottam Das, where we see here this, this cultivating this mood of lalasha, like that. Yeah, is that this? But what we see here is, and I'm drawing here on the notion of Gavin Flood did a book on the tantric body, called The Tantric Body, where he develops the notion drawn from linguistic anthropology of entextualizing context, rooting one thing, putting it into text, taking it out of context. But he sees there as the tantric body as a body that is inscribed by the narrative of tradition. It doesn't pre-exist. It's being through text. It's being essentially over time being constructed by the practitioner, by their submission to the narrative of tradition. Yeah, and you see he analyzes there the use of pronouns, where there's the indexical eye of the practitioner, the anaphoric eye of the text itself, of discourse, and that's where cultural transmission takes place, where essentially the anaphoric eye overwhelms the indexical eye of the practitioner. That there is the root. These linguistic anthropologists like Greg Urban and Michael Silverstein, etc., root some of the key translations of it. So Gavin Flood dealt with that in relation to the tantric body. I see that also in relation to the Gaudiya context. The poems being produced by the likes of Narottam serve as also kind of practice guides where they're outlining now the lila of the identity of the Manjaris, not the specific identities, but this life world in a sense. And so why I don't quite like visualization, it's not just a seeing, it's an entire sensorial life world. There, what's being transmitted is a sense of rolling on the ground, tear streaming, the scent, the entire sensorial domain is being transmitted through this process, undergirded by also key here, and which I think Gavin in his work perhaps didn't spotlight as much, but I think it's very relevant in the devotional context. The entangled in this, and as a sort of prerequisite for it, is the cultivation of one's orientation to the sensory domain being transmitted. So one's entering that leader, but if you just hear this thing, it's not that it can just be meaningless to it. You just so one person's reading of the text is entirely different from the intense bhaktas, right? One is just, this is some stuff on another person is cultivating that every day through the orientation of the greed, when will I get this? I don't have it yet. I want it. When will I be when will I be here? So this notion of the when, Yeah, exactly. And it's this that orients the practitioner to the thing. This orientation of affect and mood, I would say, affect is not just the effect, it's not just a result of the sensorial, but is also what orients the practitioner devotionally to the sensorial content being transmitted as well. Sorry, this is to go off on another subject that we're dealing with tomorrow.
Thank you. Aisha Inani was here.
Oh yeah.
She also had been to Malta because she's looking for Sheikh Subodaya, the text by Sufi.
Yes, yes.
Your speaking
Yeah.
there. So my second question is related to, when we are talking about this Java, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism flourished in a milieu when in Bengal there was the arrival of Islam, and especially also the arrival of the Sufis. And as I am reading some of the texts written by the Sufis in Middle Bengali, I can see that there is a huge overlap, exchange of ideas. They are taking ideas from yoga, and like they are talking about this lila. They are when they are talking about God, they are talking about Niranjana.
Yes.
Okay, so and bodily practices, all those things are there. So my question is, what was the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, practitioners' perception of Islam, or what was their attitude towards the religious practices of the Muslims, especially of the Sufis?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And Tony was the book he didn't quite finish, but it's nearly he did a lot of, was a book actually specifically on that theme, honing in on the character of Java Haridas. And his thesis, I don't want to represent, I don't know that work well enough yet to be able to represent it faithfully, but in broad brushstrokes, that he wanted to complicate this narrative of conversion, that Haridas needed to be converted to a Hindu, or to a that this notion of conversion is not so prevalent, he felt, and that actually there was a background, great deal of resonance between the two sort of symbolic and conceptual worlds of the Sufis and the Gaudiyas. Ayesha, of course, in her Muhammad Avatar also deals with this quite a bit, in terms of how this Nabi Vangsha, is sort of trying to communicate Islam to this audience by, having to contend with the Gaudiyas in that context as well. In terms of the relationship between, or the attitudes toward this Islam that are articulated in sort of key works of the Gaudiyas, I would suggest it's quite ambivalent, explicitly. Of course, we know that many were working with the Saint Shai regime as well, right? They're not least, Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami were ministers in some way, etc. W. Kash and Shakari Malikas, and many others. Joe O'Connell has noted many prominent figures in the early associates of Chaitanya were working, for the regime in some way or another. The texts themselves, I would suggest, the Sanskritic works are somewhat more stereotypical of Sanskritic discourse. Where there's a bit of a kind of silence. Yeah, there's somewhat of a silence. Vernacular sources are not the case. But then you take a text like the Charitamrita, where there's a lot of, quite a number of prominent episodes of encounter with Muslims in various forms. Chandkaji, of this Navadip area, where there's an encounter, a sort of confrontation. There is a shift there from the Vrindavandas' Chaitanya Bhagavat, where this is a much more aggressive confrontation, to actually something that's more gentle in a sense. And then at the same time, there's also Chaitanya, when he's on his travels, him and his companions encounter some peers, a peer and some of his companions, and they enter into dialogue, and Chaitanya himself says, actually, what your scriptures teach, they're teaching the truth, like that, and then he says that God is blackish, God is a person, God is a face, God is essentially God is creator. Vrindavandas has words to similar effect as well at times, the Puran, these sort of equations at times. But then you also have, in like the episode of the Chandkaji, where Chaitanya there is saying, oh, but your Shastra is Adunik, Kalpana. So there's ambivalence, different ways it's treated in different contexts. Yeah, that's as much as I think I can say about that for now, but Tony had a lot to say on that. The notion of conversion, Ayesha deals with, it's interesting, I haven't really spoken to them at length about how conversion, because Tony's work was sort of problematizing conversion. Ayesha's dealing in a very sophisticated way with sort of a Islamic conversion narrative, you know, in her...
One should look at Eton also.
Eton as well, yes, certainly. On the point of conversion, and in one of my final, I think actually my final conversation with Tony in person when I was there just a few weeks before he passed, we did speak though about, and something that I had actually forgotten telling him, but quite a few years ago, we've been speaking on this theme for quite some time. But I said there, but Haridas, his observation is that Haridas, when his burial and the whole construction of it basically mimics that of a Sufi Dargah. You know, I mean, it's very interesting. So he's got some really interesting things to say there that I think that need to be put out there at some point. So we'll really see about that. But so he was like, no, actually, he was Sufi doing Krishna zikr. You know what I mean? He was like that, just doing that. But then he did also acknowledge at the end, he said, but of course, in the narrative of the Charitamrita, Haridas, when he's about to pass, he calls for Chaitanya, asks his permission if he can leave, and says, I only ask you, he asked three things, I think. If I can look into your face as I'm leaving, if I can chant your name as I'm leaving, and if I can hold your feet, or something like this. So Tony said, this is obviously he was a Vaishnava of some kind, you know what I mean? But then to distinguish between, and there are certain expressions in the Charitamrita, like, you don't find like, I don't know, what would the conversion be like? Porivartan kara, I don't know what the, you know, but you do find like simple things like in Chaitanya went to the south, Bhakta Puri. He's making them bhaktas. He made them bhaktas. So to become devotees, whether they're Muslim or Hindu, is I think not the decisive thing, but he made them bhaktas. Yeah.
And he left that Haridas is that his disciple is there in Puri.
Yes.
Siddha
Bakul, yes, exactly. Yeah. And they do the chanting there. All the,
yes.
Very
And they worship the Damodar.
yes.
Yeah, the version of Krishna, the Damodar.
Yes, yeah.
And whole Kartik Maas, then for Niyam Seva, for that.
Wow, that's
Because that all the Vaishnava practice is there.
yes, definitely. There's Angelica Malinar did some work on some of these mantras, but surprisingly, I was speaking with Dr. Abhishek Ghosh, the University of Kolkata, recently about this. So we've been putting together the Oxford Handbook of Gaudiya Vaishnava Studies, and we've fairly about 38 chapters, and we have a section on region, the Hindi, you know, the Gaudiyas among the Hindi-speaking world, Assam, you know, Manipur. I can't find anyone to write on Orissa, which is crazy because it's such an important place for this. I don't know whether I'm just ignorant of this, but there doesn't seem to be much work. I mean, there was, of course, Prabhat Mukherjee, who did some excellent, very, fundamental works on the Chaitanya faith in Orissa. But I don't know much. I mean,
I'll suggest you a late.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah.
Great, great, yeah, great.
Archival photograph or something?
No, this is my own painting. That's someone that I bought from, or I gave a donation to from a friend, who's a beautiful artist. She does. She's taken inspiration, from it. She's actually Russian practitioner. Wonderful, yeah, it's a great one. It's in Jharkhand, when he's going through and making the tigers dance, giving them Krishna Nam.
We had a discussion yesterday on critical animals too.
Oh yeah, really.
Yeah. So any other questions?